A very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. We will start with the topics discussion today. The first topic we'll be taking up is about misinformation or fake news. So this is a part of your GS2 syllabus, and fake news is this topic has been in news several times even previously. For most recently, we remember how because of fake news there has been several lynchings that happened in India because there was a news that got circulated that some of the people were involved in abducting children. So this news is spread, and there were some lynchings that happened in India because of this fake news. So like that, there have been several fake news and misinformation which has deceived people, and it has led to more polarization in the society. It has given rise to a lot of communal riots in the society. For example, the Muzaffarnagar riots that happened in 2013 was a result of the fake news. So like that, fake news or misinformation has played havoc with the society. It has interrupted and disturbed the social fabric of the society by creating many giving rise to many communal riots, and it has also deceived a lot of people because of this fake news. So in this article, this whole article was talking about why misinformation has become a cause of concern now, but not previously. So now we will analyze why misinformation has been a cause of concern. The first thing is the presence of social media. So earlier it was just the print media which had a limited reach, but now we have social media websites like Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp, and also because of which the reach of the social media has been very huge. Any news, any small piece of news can dangerously spread like a wildfire with the help of the social media. So that is why this has become more dangerous, that any fake news can spread so fastly that it can have dangerous consequences. So, and also a lot of people are online through the social media, so therefore a small piece of information can spread among a large mass of people, and they can all be influenced by that misinformation or fake news. But earlier the access to the print media was limited, but social media has made this access much more to the people. So this is one cause of concern why misinformation has been a cause of concern now. The second cause of concern is the potential that this misinformation has to stoke violence. So as we just discussed in the beginning, how it has led to mob lynchings. So there was a fake news that somebody was carrying the meat of a cattle flesh, so therefore somebody has butchered the cattle, and therefore that man was lynched. So this happened in Dadri lynchings also. So then again there was a fake news saying some of the people were child abductors and how they were lynched. So later on it was seen that this was actually a commercial or an advertisement that was shot in Pakistan. So like that, these misinformation have a lot of potential to stoke violence in the society. Similarly, you go back to the Muzaffarnagar riots of 2013. So here again misinformation played a lot of role in precipitating the communal violence and hatred between the two communities. So therefore this misinformation has a lot of potential to stoke violence in the society and disturb the law and order in the society and public order in the society. So that is another reason why it is a cause of concern. The third reason is the internet users. Now the number of people who are using the internet has increased, particularly after the coming of Jio. So after the coming of Jio, nearly 600 to 700 million people have come online, and these internet users are the new internet users, and they are mostly from the rural areas and the smaller towns and cities. So these internet users are completely new to the world of the internet and social media, and they really do not know what exactly goes on in the social media. So whenever they see anything, they tend to believe that it is true. So these more number of internet users, because of the popularity of the Jio platform, has again become a cause of concern, because due to an increase in the internet users, the target or the potential audience of this misinformation has also now increased a lot. So it can have that much more impact on that many more number of people. The fourth reason is that this misinformation has actually started to act as an echo chamber, particularly so because these social media platforms are using some algorithms that will actually act like echo chambers. So echo chambers means what? When we speak, if our voice gets echoed, then we can hear our own voice. So similarly, what happens is whenever we are viewing something in a social media or some post that I'm viewing, so based on my viewership, based on what I'm viewing in the social media, then I tend to get posts which are very similar to what I'm viewing. For example, if somebody is looking at posts which are right wing based posts, then that person is likely to see more and more of right wing based posts rather than another opinion. So therefore, whatever the person tends to believe, the same thing gets echoed on that person, because these algorithms, they choose those kind of posts which I have previously viewed, and these algorithms will select only those kind of posts and then show it to me again and again. So this will lead to what is called as a confirmation bias. So these are the important keywords that you will have to use in your answer. Confirmation bias means that I have read something which is actually a misinformation, but I believe that it is true. So later on, I will search for more and more articles only to make sure that whatever I have just believed to be true is actually true. So that means I don't even want to see the other side of it. I already believe that something is true, which is actually a misinformation, but then I just want to confirm that this is true. So I am not open to the other side of it, but rather I just want to confirm that whatever I am thinking is true. So this is what is called as a confirmation bias. So when I see articles of some type, and if the algorithms of Facebook and Twitter work in a way that they show and display to me articles of similar nature, then I will be reading the similar types of articles, and that will lead to a confirmation within me that this misinformation is actually true. So this is what the echo chambers do, and this is what these algorithms that these social media platforms are using. So they are actually creating echo chambers for people. So whatever they believe, whether it is true or false, they tend to confirm it, because this whole social media platform itself is acting like an echo chamber. So these are the various causes of concern when it comes to misinformation or fake news. So I want to tell that whenever you talk about misinformation or fake news, this fake news means three things acting at the same time. One is the mistrust, there is mistrust, next there is misinformation, and then there is manipulation. So these are the three important things when you talk about fake news. So fake news is mistrust, misinformation, and then manipulation. All of these three are the integral components of what constitutes a fake news. So this you can add in your whenever you're writing answers on fake news. So this gives a good value addition that fake news is nothing but three M's, which is mistrust, misinformation, and manipulation. So after this, you may have to write about what should the government do to reduce the occurrence of the fake news. So first is that we must have a law which can properly and objectively define fake news, because still now we do not have anything which properly and unambiguously define what a fake news is. Second, we also have to put responsibility on the users of the social media, who have so much of freedom to post anything that they want. So if they are posting something unwarranted and which is actually misinformation and can stoke violence, they need to be taken into the books, and they need to be given exemplary punishment. Third, we also need to make responsible these social media platforms, and they must use artificial intelligence and various other technologies through which these kinds of misinformation can be identified and they can be removed from the social media websites. So it must be possible for the users also to flag such news, and it must be possible for the social media platforms to remove such fake news from the website. So for that, they can use machine learning, artificial intelligence technologies, and they can do the same. So these are whenever you are writing about the steps, there are mainly three different stakeholders. One is the government, the other is the private sector or the social media platforms, and then the third stakeholder being the us, that is the people. So you can divide your answer or the steps into three parts. One is the steps that the government has to take, other is the steps that the private sector, the social media platforms have to take, and third is what we can do. So like that, your answer will be more organized and organic, and that can give a very systematic approach to answering the question of what measures should be taken to curb fake news and misinformation. And also I had read a case study about the SP of Telangana, Rema Rajeshwari, and who had taken some very good steps to curb fake news in her district. So I won't be telling what she did. So this is the small homework for you all today. You have to find out what Rema Rajeshwari had done in Telangana, and you have to write that in the comment section. So this can be a very good case study for you when you're answering question on fake news. And don't forget to mention Rema Rajeshwari's approach as a case study in such questions. So this is your value addition for the day. Now we move on to the next topic. The next we'll be discussing is a motivational story about Osaka Naomi. So she, as you must be knowing, is the world number one female tennis player. She was born in, she is originally from Japan, but then she was born and brought up in United States. So she has a very inspiring story behind her, as in now she is that champion on the court. So often whenever we see celebrities, we don't just appreciate them for their on-screen presence or for their on-court presence, but also the way they conduct themselves otherwise in their own personal lives. So what Osaka Naomi has done is, when the Black Lives Matter movement started in the United States, since then she has been extremely supportive of the movement. So she in fact used her social media account to spread messages about the same. She even flew down to Minneapolis and she attended the protests there that were happening against the death of George Floyd. And even in her social media messages that she put up, she amplified the messages regarding organizations who were working for the betterment of the Black lives in America. She also made it a point to tell and convey her audience how difficult the life is for people of color in America. And even to the United States or US Open, where she came to participate, she got with her 7 masks, and on 7 masks were printed the 7 people who had played an important role in the for the blacks people and for stopping the discrimination against them. So 7 such faces were printed on these 7 masks. So if these 7 masks are to be used, then she has to play 7 matches, which means starting from the first round till the final round she has to play. And she got the 7 masks in the first round itself, which shows her confidence that she is going to reach the final. And she not just reached the final, but she also won her third Grand Slam. So this shows the level of confidence that she has on her abilities as a tennis player, but also the fact that how intuitively and how nicely she integrated her sport and her game with some very good social message that not to discriminate against the blacks. So these two she could integrate, and while playing her sport she also conveyed such a beautiful message through the masks, that the black lives are not to be discriminated against. So that is something that's really very phenomenal, and we can learn a lot of inspirational lessons from Osaka Naomi. So these kind of motivational stories you can use in your GS Ethics 4 paper or your essay paper, depending upon the topic or the question. So you just basically need to read through these kind of motivational stories, one for our own motivation, that how even when we become something tomorrow, how we can contribute to a larger goal. No matter in which field we are, it is always possible for us to reach out to the vulnerable and the discriminated ones, and we can show our support to them. No matter what we are doing in our lives professionally, it is always possible for us to reach out to such downtrodden people. And at the same time, these motivational stories, if it is there at the back of your mind, when you look at the question or the essay topic in the examination hall, definitely if you connect with the story now, as in when I'm telling you the story of Osaka Naomi, if you connect with this story, then that story is going to be there at the back of your mind. And if when in the exam, if you see the question or the essay topic, this story is going to click to you if there is the relevance of this story to be written in that particular topic or question. So just remember these stories, make a short note about such stories, so that you just brush through the stories before you go to the exam hall, so that depending upon the topic you will recollect the right type of story. So now we move on to the next topic. The next topic we're going to see is related to the women issues, about which we're going to discuss a case study. So as women come under the vulnerable section of the society, so that will come under your GS paper 2, or it can also come under your GS paper 1, which talks about the Indian society. So the reason we are discussing this case study is several times you may be asked, even previously we discussed how the women's representation bill has lapsed twice in the Indian parliament, and that has not been taken up. So there are issues related to the underrepresentation of women in the political sphere. So you may have a full-fledged question on that, or even otherwise a general question on the women empowerment. Whenever we talk about women empowerment, you will have to talk about the economic sphere, the political sphere, the social sphere, the educational and the health. So all of those categories you will have to address whenever you are talking about women empowerment in general. So this is a case study about Kenya's constitution. So Article 27 and Clause 8 of Kenya's constitution says that the legislators of the Kenya should take steps to ensure that not more than 2/3 members of any of the elected bodies or appointed bodies should belong to the same gender. So that means if a particular elected or appointed body has 100 members, then just 66, more than 66 should not belong to the same gender. So this ensures that at least 33% of the composition of any elected body or any appointed body are going to be women, because more than 66% of the composition of any body cannot belong to the same gender. This is what the Kenya's constitution is saying. So on this backdrop, you analyze with respect to the Indian constitution, where 33% of reservation in the parliament has been proposed by two bills that were introduced once in 1996 and another time in 2010, and both the bill have lapsed, and this has not been assumed to be a significant step or a very important thing to be considered in the parliament, and since then this has lapsed and no bill has been introduced for the women reservation in the parliament. Therefore the political representation of the women in India has been very, very low. So this is one case study that you can quote whenever you're talking about the political representation of women and or their representation in these important elected and appointed bodies. However, if you go through this article is also critical about China's constitution, because even though the constitution mentions this rule, this is more often than not followed in the breach itself. So women representation in Kenya is also not according to this article of Kenya's constitution. So this article, even it is criticizing Kenya for not strictly implementing this article of the constitution and not ensuring a good representation of the women in its bodies. But however, whenever you are quoting, and whatever we have to see or take from this article is strictly from the exam point of view. So you have a good case study of Kenya's constitution which you can quote in your answers, and how it is implemented in Kenya is not important from the exam point of view, and nobody is going to know whether this is being implemented properly or not. So just that if you write this case study in the answer, that will make a huge difference to the quality of your answer from the evaluator's point of view. So this is an important case study that you can take note to be written while you are addressing any women related issues. Now we move on to the next topic. The next topic we'll be discussing is about the labor laws, which is a part of your GS3 syllabus. And labor laws we have already discussed a sufficient number of times before, where we have seen what is wrong with the recently introduced labor code in the parliament which has been passed. So whenever you are trying to answer a question that says critically analyze the labor code that was recently passed, so you will need to have some points which you are also talking about in favor of the labor laws. That means you need points both positive as well as negative for answering the questions that ask for critical analysis. So in the previous analysis of labor codes that we have already seen, we have mostly addressed the negative part. So today we will take up some positive part of the labor laws so that you can write a good answer on critical analysis. So now you can use this opportunity to go back to the previous videos where we have discussed labor laws and revise all the negative points as well, so that your entire answer is ready. So there is code on industrial relations. So this first of all talks about a reskilling fund. So a reskilling fund is going to be set up, and this fund is going to be used for reskilling the workers, because there will be change in the technology, there will be change in the industrial processes as the changes happen in the society. So therefore the workers may have to be reskilled again and again as and when the technology becomes obsolete and a new technology comes up, or as and when the processes change, the workers will have to be reskilled. So a reskilling fund is established specifically for this purpose, where the workers are provided with a lifelong learning opportunity, and they will be able to reskill themselves depending upon the technological and the process changes. That is the first good thing. Second is about the gratuity benefits. So gratuity is something that is given upon the retirement, either voluntarily or the mandatory one that happens at the age of 60 years. So the gratuity benefits were earlier available only to the regular employees after they have completed a service of 5 years. But now this Code on Industrial Relations has extended the gratuity benefits even to the fixed term employment contract, which is of at least 1 year. So even after just 1 year of fixed term employment contract, the employees become eligible for gratuity benefits, which was earlier available only to the regular employees who have served for more than 5 years, but now it is available with 1 year service even under the fixed term employment contract. So this again is a second good thing. The third is industrial relations ask for very harmonious relations between the employees and the employer. So sometimes the employees may have to resort to some strikes and lockdowns to get their grievances redressed or to get their demands fulfilled from the employers. So whenever these workers have the plan of going on a strike or lockdown, they will have to give a notice period of 14 days. So why this is good? Because this notice period can give a good cushion for even the employers to prepare for the strike or the lockdown. And secondly, this 14 days is a good time within which the employers can enter into negotiation with the employees, and they can bargain and they can mediate and settle the matter, and the strike need not even take place that time. So they can peacefully resolve the matter in this notice period of 14 days. So this again is a good thing. Next, we talk about the Social Security Code. So in this, it is saying that even the gig and the platform workers are eligible for Social Security. So gig economy, we have even once previously discussed in one of the ICANN videos. Gig economy comprises of the part-time workers. For example, somebody is working full-time somewhere else, but in the evenings, the person is engaged in Ola or Uber car driving. So that is a part-time job. So a person may be doing 3 to 4 part-time jobs in the entire day. So that is how the economy is evolving. Now more and more people are going towards more number of part-time jobs. So therefore there is a gig economy, that is what we call. So these part-time workers earlier did not enjoy any social security benefits. So now what the Social Security Code is saying is it is going to extend the social security benefits even to the gig and the platform workers. So that is again a good thing. Next, the Social Security Code is talking about an insurance coverage that will extend even to the plantation workers. So earlier they didn't have that. So now this code is talking about an insurance coverage even to the plantation workers. There will also be annual free health checkups that will be done to all the workers, that will be taken up by the employers. So it is going to be an annual checkup, and it is also going to be a free checkup. So that is to take care of the health of the workers in the firm. Next is a safety committee is also going to be formed in case of establishments which can include mines, factories, even plantations, and this safety committee is there to ensure and to see and monitor whether all the safety protocols and the guidelines are being followed and the worker safety are being ensured or not. So safety committees are also going to be formed. And lastly, the policy is also more gender sensitive, because the previous version had forbidden women being employed in night shifts for some kind of works. But now this code is saying that women can be employed in a night shift for any kind of work, and it is actually putting the responsibility on the employer to provide right kind of atmosphere, a conducive atmosphere for the woman to be able to work at night to ensure her safety for pickup and drop. So it is putting the responsibility on the employer to do it, and thereby it is allowing the woman more freedom to be employed even in the night shifts, which earlier women were debarred from. So this again is a more gender sensitive step, where women were earlier forbidden from working in the night shifts, but now they can. So they can now improve their women labor can now improve their income as well, and also their labor force participation rate may improve because of this measure. So these were the good things, some of the good things that you can mention when you're critically analyzing the recently passed labor code. So that is it for today. The other articles that weren't important from exam point of view, or which we have already previously discussed. Today also we will be putting in the pinned comment the previous times in the ICANN videos wherever we have discussed the topics that we have discussed today. So that is it for today. Thank you.